Assalamu alaikum, dear brother.
Alaikum salam and good day. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Great, great. Always a pleasure.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. An increasing pleasure, I might add. I'm getting a bit absent-minded on occasion, but I don't know if that's because I'm becoming demented or because I'm just preoccupied as I walk around contemplating whatever needs to be contemplated. I think it's a bit of both, actually. We sort of decline a little bit as we get older. And I suppose there's reasons for that. I thought about the post-Diluvian depression that's mentioned in the Bible. Not that Allah is subject to depression, but he was certainly not pleased with what was going on the earth at that particular time, if we believe the biblical account. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we're always talking about frequencies and energies and things of this nature. And something happened then, if we take the biblical account seriously, that affected everyone thereafter. The passage said something to the effect that Allah was so displeased that he swore that he was not going to strive with mankind in the same manner, or something to that effect, and he cut short our days down from about 1,000 or so years to 120 years. I thought about that about 40 years ago when I first read that passage seriously, and I was a smoker, so I decided to calculate the years that I was using up with my addiction, you see. And what I did was, I don't remember the exact formula, but I had some sort of cockamamie formula I was using. And
Yeah.
anyway, anyway, according to that formula, I was knocking off about 40 of those years. And I figured I'd be hitting the dirt at about 82 or 83, something of that nature. And that kind of stuck in my craw all these years. It's sort of still there. The only problem was about 5 years ago, I had a heart attack and quadruple bypass surgery. So I was wrong, you see. How come maybe my theory was. And so I'm sitting here talking with you and about to confess that I'm probably wrong about a lot of things, but I'm also right about a lot of things, or should I better say correct about a lot of things. You know, those foreign non-English speakers get a bit confused with that English word right. We use it so many different ways. And I always find myself correcting myself, saying, okay, well, I meant correct, not right, versus left, and this sort of thing. Anyway, yeah, we do have all sorts of symbols that surround us and affect the way that we think. And this has been an ongoing struggle with our attempts to communicate effectively and correctly with each other. Now, these symbols, at one time, shall I say, well, okay, I'll venture to say in the beginning, they had a correct meaning. And I think many of these symbols that we're familiar with have been twisted to an incorrect position in our mentation, so that we no longer perceive the truth of these symbols. And some of these symbols are, well, many of these symbols have occult meanings. And a lot of people think that these symbols represent some sort of evil. Well, I struggled with that term evil and decided a wee while ago that evil is based on man's intention, and all other things that we might consider evil or even bad are just accidents. But intention comprises the essence of evil, I would imagine. I haven't taken it any further than that, so we'll just leave it there. Um, so these symbols can be used for good or evil, is what I'm trying to say. And over the years, many of these symbols have been used for evil purposes, and those evil purposes have primarily been on behalf of elitist leaders to allow them sufficient room to plunder the masses, and many times in the name of God. And I think that's a pretty foregone conclusion, that people who have read history and have spent any time with it can accept as the truth of the matter. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because these symbols represent us in many ways. Um, in many ways. And they should not have been allowed to do that, but for the actions or the inactions of men. Now, when I say men here, I'm not including women because I'm holding men, the gender responsible here, for standing up in the Aleph sense, you see, in the upright sense. You know, you watch these mafia films and they say, oh, this so-and-so is a stand-up guy. Well, that's what I'm talking about here. We're talking about those men who are supposed to stand up for the truth. And not that I'm going to leave the women out of the picture here. And I have reasons for bringing in the male and the female aspect of this now. So bear with me, dear brother.
Certainly.
The women in question who have not been supporting Aleph males, you see, or the uprightness of this all-important alphabetic symbol, we can say, they're also to blame because they've been supporting the wrong types of men. And without their support, the men would not have supported the correct application of the symbols that we're discussing here. So the women are just as much to blame over the centuries and over the years. Those queens and duchesses and ladies of the night who have turned their back on Aleph men. You see, now you have to ask the question, why has that occurred? And we'll go back to the misuse of the symbols now, can't we? Because they were used to turn the minds and therefore the wills and the thoughts and the actions of men and women away from being Aleph. I hope that made some sort of sense. Now, going back to the origin of these symbols, let's just take the eye that we were discussing, the unification of both visual fields that we were discussing last week. Because I've been, after we finish our discussions, all of these things churn in my soul and in my mind for the entire week that I kind of push it forward for the next discussion, inshallah. And so let's just take this symbol, the eye. Well, you related it quite accurately to the awakening of the pineal gland. And we're not talking about the pineal gland physically, we're talking about it metaphysically, because that's the unification of both aspects of visualizing and perceiving the cosmos in which we find ourselves. Now, when I say cosmos, I'm referring to the material realm as well as the immaterial realm, because there's all kinds of stuff out there in the void, that stuff we call space, which we think is an empty space, for want of a better word, that is not empty at all, because it has all kinds of energy in it. So what we want to do when we unify the vision, our spiritual vision, if you will, into the one eye that's represented by the pineal gland, which sits right where the optic chiasma is, where both the visual fields cross, you see. This is not accident. Allah doesn't do anything by accident. And, you think about these things, and there's kind of a unification right there of not just the vision, but all of the energy that passes through those that optic chiasma, which is crossing there. So light is energy. All proceeds from light. You see, all that we know, all that we are, proceeds from light, and the various manifestations, via kun fire kun, that forms this light, that shapes it into what becomes what we perceive as the material realm, whether it's animate or inanimate, it doesn't matter, okay? It all proceeds from some form of light. And the physicists are finally getting to the point where, they're admitting that. It's frightening because, well, there are things that move faster than the speed of light, they're finding out as well. And that's the force that prevents the cosmic bodies from crashing in on each other, see? So there's all sorts of things that we can discuss and talk about over our little checkerboard here, as people listen in to that they don't commonly think about. And I want to bring these ideas into some form of better focus, because when we're talking about the use of these symbols in ancient times for spiritual, religio-spiritual purposes, if we can use that term, to improve our estate, to improve our ability to communicate with each other and therefore also with our Creator, these were forms that were in shapes that were used to initiate us into that relationship. And when I say initiate, I'm talking about taking the uninitiated child who's just part and parcel of the entire cosmos and concentrating their consciousness down into this pineal gland. You see, this third eye, this singular vision. Okay, so that was the purpose of, dare I say it, the eye of Horus. Okay, dare I say that, brother? Yes, I think so. That was the initial purpose, but Pharaoh got proud. One of these guys, somewhere along the line of this religious process, of this method of teaching men to be better so that they can stand upright, somebody got proud and arrogant and twisted that thing into an idolatrous symbol. And somehow along the way, that symbol became acceptable to a certain group of people who stayed at that deformed level of initiation. They accepted a lie. They accepted the idolatry, and this thing turned into, if you leave the Egyptians and go back to the ancient Greeks or the Persians, you get this monster called Kronos, who eats his children. You see, and this is a perversion of the eye of Horus, as best as I can make it. Now, I'm not, you know, I'm an arcane specialist, but I have done a fair amount of arcane specialist, but I have done a fair amount of reading in those realms and a fair amount of contemplation, and I have sincerely asked Allah to guide me. And you see, when we're teaching, well, the best forms of teaching is to tell a story. You see, that's what the scripture is. It tells us a story. It's not necessarily historically accurate, but it is metaphorically accurate, spiritually accurate. It represents the archetypes of this failure or success to communicate with our Creator and therefore communicate with each other. You see, the child communicates effectively without having to crystallize this vision, you see, and be initiated, you see. Oh, you'll understand when you grow up. You know what that means. You see. Well, there's another form of, there's other levels of maturity. And we want to take the mature male who should be having his children with his spouse in their early 20s. We want to take them to the next level of maturity when they're in their 40s and entering middle life, and then hopefully take them into this level of initiation so that they can bring these visual fields together and coordinate and overcome their lower nature, because they've been struggling with it for them, for the last 20 years. And grandma and grandpa should be sitting back there and saying, okay, they're ready now. Okay, so yeah, let's teach them. Let's give them some authority. The African tribes had this down centuries ago. Yes, they knew what they were doing, and like people like the Oromo, I'm sure that our beloved apostle knew about them because they were right across the sea. Absolutely. And he took some lessons. He took some lessons from their life ways.
Absolutely,
you see.
I'm convinced.
Yeah. So anyway, some of these things I'm just saying so that you know that we're on the same page. But other things I'm saying because our listeners need to hear them. They need to hear this story. Now, the deformation of the system of initiations in the ancient world, going from this unified vision to the eye of Kronos, who represents a cyclops, who's a carnivore, cannibal, who eats his children, devours their substance, not just their body, their life forces, everything. This is a very, very evil system. And this is the system under which we are now subjectified by this elitist world system. At least it seems that way to me. They have taken this deformed system of initiation that, has them laying people in a coffin only to get them to resurrect into their system as a initiate of selfishness. You see, because that's what it is. I mean, hey, if you're hungry, even if you're not hungry, and your wife hands you the child, and you roast them and eat them, that's a pretty evil thing to do. And we know that this has been done, and it's still being done. Okay, in some corners of the earth that don't want to be spoken about. We know the Aztecs did this. We know all sorts of people all over the world have done these sorts of activities. Now, eh, people ask me, the students ask me, well, why they do it? And I say, well, if it didn't work, they wouldn't do it. See? So at some level, it must work. Now, I haven't tried it out. Okay. So all of this is sort of abstract, you know, tertiary, quaternary knowledge that comes down to me distilled by other writers over the ages. And I have known some witches and, a few people associated with those circles, and they sure do think in that direction. I've had discussions with them, and I've had a discussion with a 33rd degree Freemason who told me face to face over a cup of coffee at 3 o'clock in the morning that he'd rather rule in hell with Satan. Okay, so, this was somebody who was high placed in the government of the United States of America. And if you're interested in knowing about it, well, you better contact me personally because I'm not going to broadcast his name here. Anyway, these people exist and they do these things. They do these dastardly things, dear brother. And they have taken this ancient initiation symbol and systems, which were meant for our good, no matter where they were established in the world. They've taken them all and now they've twisted them into one unified archetype, and it got everybody staring at this pentagram, in the center of whatever setting they want to make it artistically, and everybody's got a star on their forehead or a star on their flag or a star on the coffin, or it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. Okay, it's all part of the same deformed system of initiation that has dedicated itself to plunder of souls, plunder of means of souls, plunder of means, plunder of money, plunder of resources. And now it's destroying the earth as we sit here. Oh my God, you're going to have a lot to unpack here. You're going to have a lot to unpack here. Because I'm still learning about this stuff. I'm still learning about this stuff. I'm still learning about it. And I'm appalled by the fact that most of our brothers and sisters don't know these things at all. And what's worse is that our alim completely ignore this realm of knowledge. They just don't discuss it at all. Not at all. And if I bring it up, I almost immediately marginalized whatever board I did find myself sitting at years ago. All of this to do with our approach now to the word faith. You see, okay. I said all of that just to bring us back to faith, and fatia, and the openings. Because sort of what I've done here is I'm opening this big can, and I'm going to hand it back to you, with all the worms wiggling, and what has to do with faith and the activation of that faith. Because we talked a little bit last week about faith and belief, and we got to the point where, well, you got to be the Muslim that we say or would like to say or think that we are. We have to do more than believe. Belief is not enough. It's insufficient. It's incapable of serving our Creator as He wishes us to serve Him. Is it not? Of course. So you have to activate this faith. And I'm sure that the activation of the faith has to do with the bringing together of the visual fields. And oh my God, well, here we come back to the gender now, don't we? Because it's not gender per se as much as it is qualities that we like to assign to gender. Oh, we say, well, the woman is softer and more receptive and more supportive and nurturing and all that sort of thing. Well, those same qualities can also be found in the man, but their expression is different, you see. But so these are qualities, they're not gender. And there are people out there who saying, oh, God's a male and a female, you see. And I'm a staunch opponent of any kind of approach to anthropomorphism. I don't think that that's anything that we can use in our creator. I don't think we should I don't think we should even try to describe our creator. He's beyond what we're capable of imagining. So those people who want to put a bisexual God up there in the center of that star I was talking about, they got a problem, and it's a very serious problem that they're going to have to face on Judgment Day, and we're all confronted with that same problem because it is at the basis of this idolatry, this turning, this deformation of the initiate system. That system which should make us responsible adults, so that by the time we have these white hairs, you'll see, or white beards or growing gray hairs becoming, as they say, Gandalf the White. Okay, so we're going that direction. Although I have problems with the Lord of the Rings, but we can discuss that another time, inshallah. But by the time we become that person, that's what we're looking at. We're trying to become, striving to become that wise man, the one that the Jews would they have a word for it. Oh, it's escaping me. I used to know it. There's a certain case. This system of initiation is ongoing process, is an ongoing evolution. This system of initiation is ongoing process, is an ongoing evolution, evolutionary development, not just of mankind in general, but of the individual. That has been stopped by the perversion of the system of initiation. It has been stopped. And that's a whole area of discussion that needs to be addressed, I think, for the sake of our listeners, those who are students like us who are looking over our shoulders as we play chess here or play checkers, dear friend. So what has all of this to do with faith, activating faith, the bringing together of the visual fields into this unified vision, so that we can stand upright in Alif? Oh my God, we're going right back to our first discussion now, aren't we?
Yeah. 9
Isn't this
sessions
wonderful?
ago.
Isn't this wonderful?
It's beautiful.
Alhamdulillah.
It's beautiful.
Okay, so dear brother, yeah, all these worms are wiggling now.
It's all right.
I hand them to
I
you.
brought my dewormer with me. Opener, so
Yeah.
any other cans that need to be open, we can handle that.
Yeah.
Any other cans that need to be open, we can handle that.
All right.
So we begin officially. I begin officially with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, with Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. I begin by giving all praise to the source creator, known as Allah in the Quran and known as many other beautiful names in previous scriptures.
Alhamdulillah.
That we're speaking about, or as you said, this union, speaking about, or as you said, this union between the right and the left, so to speak. And when I say right and left, I'm speaking specifically about the right and left hemispheres of the human brain.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about a tool that Allah has, no other creature has the like of it. So it distinguishes us. Nature has the like of it. So it distinguishes us as human beings from common animals, other forms of life, biology, and it allows us a degree of, I don't like the word superiority, I would just say a degree of distinction, because whether you become superior or not is going to depend on your approach to that gift you've been discussing as the human brain, and also that additional tool that Allah has put in the brain, smack dab in the center, as you know, called the pineal gland. You spoke about the Cyclops. I would say that the equivalent of that in Islamic lore would be the one that they're calling Dajjal, the one with the single eye.
Yes,
now,
yes.
He has two eyes, but one of them is a grape. So that tells us something right off the top, because grapes ferment wine, and the overconsumption of wine can cause us to become drunk. So whatever that aspect of his vision was, we know that that particular level of the Dajjal's vision brings us images and pictures that are not what Allah created them to be. It's what his own mind is now fabricating that these things are.
Yes.
And the human mind has been able to do that with just about everything that the human mind has touched. That's how we got racism in the first place. That's how we got sexism, classism, and all of the other classic isms that most people have been trained to believe is real. Like, this is the way God made this. No, it's not. This is the way the social and linguistic manipulators of the world have fabricated these ideas to impact your brain.
Yes.
So there's that one eye that is looking out, which is tantamount to what the Cyclops has and to what Kronos is walking around with in his head. But there's also that aspect of the vision. And we're talking now about a vision that should have been whole, united. We're talking about a vision now that is lopsided. Cyclops, it's lopsided.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. We look at these things and we get afraid of these things. Look at these things and we get afraid of these things. And they draw such outrageous pictures of these creatures, this, like the Cyclops. I remember the first time I saw Kronos. Oh, he's over here, blood, blood dripping from his mouth. He's got little babies in his mouth, little babies on his lap.
Yes.
Yeah, right. And I said the same thing. I said, well, who is this goat? Right. And I said the same thing. I said, well, who is this goat-headed guy with titties? Who is we're around him, and one hand up, one hand down, like John Travolta. See, they play on these things in the movies.
Yes,
right?
Of course.
Staying alive, right? So who is this? And it turns out that it's speaking about properties that Allah has created naturally within the human brain. But these script writers get a hold of this natural information and they begin to twist and turn it. See, that's the fermenting of the grape, so that you don't see the picture correctly. Although they know the true history and the true story behind the picture, and they don't see it as something fabulous and fantastic. They see it as science. But it's science that they've always strove to keep away from the masses of people, because they don't want the masses of people on this earth to be scientifically enlightened. They only want a small cadre of themselves to be scientifically and spiritually enlightened. So they give the masses foolishness, let them eat cake.
Yes.
While we dine on the food of the gods, the ambrosia.
Yes, of course.
Now, you mentioned Horus. And that's the name that the ancient Greeks gave to the character that they found in ancient Kemet, called Egypt. But his original name in the Cometian language is Heru, Heru. The Greeks called him Horus. And we speak about the eye of Horus, but we're really talking about the eye of Heru. Anytime you see a word that has an H followed by an R as consonants, it could be any vowel in between. It can be here, her, hor. Presence of something, the initial or the beginnings of something. In this
Mm-hmm.
case, it would be the initial or the beginnings of something. In this
Mm-hmm.
case, it would be the beginnings of the light,
Mm-hmm.
because Horus or Heru represents the light of the sun as it is just beginning to dawn. When it
Mm-hmm.
reaches its apex, it becomes a Ra.
Mm-hmm.
When it begins to decline, it becomes Set.
Mm-hmm.
These are
Yes.
ancient Egyptian deities,
Yes. Yes.
but they are
Yes.
in real life, but they haven't taught us the meanings or the connections with these characters in Allah's fitrah. That's why the Quran had to come and explain all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Allah explains the setting of the sun in the Quran,
Yes.
setting in murky waters.
Yes.
That's Set, the one who
Mm-hmm.
killed Osiris. No, pardon me, the one who killed Ra, Osiris. Yeah, Ra.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
these are different depictions of aspects of what is happening all of the time in nature. And therefore, if they're happening in the fitrah, they're happening inside you
Mm-hmm.
as invisible properties. Now, Muhammad the Prophet is said to have received his first revelation, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, meditating.
Mm-hmm.
While meditating,
Mm-hmm.
while meditating
Yes.
in a cave called Hira.
Uh,
See? H-R, Hira,
yes.
because that was where the initial light dawned
Mm-hmm.
of his deceased father.
Mm-hmm.
He reignited it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
He reignited it.
Yes.
And that's where we get the word hero from in English.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we talk about the hero's journey, right? But we
Right.
get it from Heru, aka Horus. Or it's not in the Quran, but in Islamic lore. We have the cave, and the cave is just the brain.
Mm-hmm.
There was no actual cave.
Mm-hmm.
They can come after me for saying that, but there was no physical cave that a physical man sat in 1500 years ago and got the first spark of revelation. All of these things are happening as properties and goings on in the human mind, in the brain itself. When the Quran speaks about Al-Kahf, Surah 18, it's and the 8 sleepers in the cave, is talking about aspects taking place right between these two lobes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Taking place in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right. So Hira was the cave where the prophet is said to have received that first spark of enlightenment. So it's the same thing for the hero. He's the one who comes to save the day,
Yes.
not the night. He comes to save the day. That's what the beginning of the sun does when it comes up over the Heruzan or the horizon. You get it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Got it.
Now, has to journey, and it has to become fully awakened, as we speak about the pineal gland as becoming fully enlightened or fully awakened. That fully awakened light is what the ancient Egyptians were calling Ra.
Mm-hmm.
His one eye, which means that he was supposed to himself have singular vision, but he was seen eating people's progeny.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a weird ass way, doctor. Excuse my
Mm-hmm.
expression. It's just a weird ass way of describing what time does,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
especially those who waste time.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually eating away at their future and future possibilities when you waste time.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? And
Sure.
Topos, as you know, means time.
Yes. Well, let me just stop you there because that is a negative aspect of the same story, of the same narrative, the same initiation rite, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we can take. Let's go back 5,000 years. We're sitting at an Egyptian campfire, and some old guy is sitting there telling people about Set and Ra and Eros and
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff, and at the same time he pops up and say, well, we also got this guy to deal with, this fella named Kronos or whatever the Egyptians might have called him. Okay. And I'm sure they had a name for this fella and another god for him as well. And he's somebody who wastes his time. He wastes his life. He wastes, this, that, and the next thing. But the initiates that I'm talking about who twisted this whole thing, they turned this into some sort of a literal.
Right. That's where the dastardly deed was done. It
Yes,
took
that's it.
something
Okay.
that should have been explained on the level of nature,
Yes.
and they corrupted it.
Yes. Yes.
That's the
Yes.
problem.
Yes.
So the Quran, let's get to the Quran now. The
Yes.
Quran had to come in order to resurrect the truth of those previous stories.
Yes.
Truth that was gathered from around the world, not just from
No.
Arabia. The
Oh,
truth
that's
of the
gonna.
Quran that was gathered from all four quarters of the planet
Yes.
and put into a book. So
Mm-hmm.
the Osiris story is in the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
The Chronos story is in the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
The Harun story is in the Quran. You heard of
Yes. Yes.
Moses' brother
Yes. Of
Harun?
course. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
Another HR phenomenon, right?
Yes. Of
So
course.
what you have to be able to do, as Allah has blessed me to do with the system of nunetics,
Mm-hmm.
is trace the connections in language based on the consonants that are put
Mm-hmm.
into words. And only Allah could have done this.
Mm-hmm.
Is based on the consonantal connections, as I call them. Once you
Mm-hmm.
understand the consonantal connections, you're off to the races, because then Osiris, or the one who's called Ausar in the ancient
Mm-hmm.
Egyptian language, Ausar, you can
Yes.
easily identify him when Allah speaks about El Asr.
Yes. Okay. Gotcha.
Ah, right? When is
Mm-hmm.
Asr?
Mm-hmm.
That's the point of the decline of the sun,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So they call it the token of time in their translation. By the
Mm-hmm.
token of time, while Asr, Innal
Mm-hmm.
insana lafi khusr.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly drowning in loss. What else do we speak of as loss? What else do we speak of as being lost? Time.
Mm-hmm.
You're losing time here. Get that
Mm-hmm.
test done. Right?
Right.
Yeah. And then Allah shows you the way to defeat the scheme of those who are robbing you of the time by saying, Illa ladina amanu wa amilu salihat, for those who accept aman, faith, which is where we started. What is faith?
Mm-hmm.
Faith is that great opening.
Mm-hmm.
It's that fact, it's that victory that comes when you understand how to manipulate the areas and the spaces and the places that Allah has allowed you to open and walk into free of charge.
Mm-hmm.
Once you learn what to do in that space, then you are operating in the clear when it comes to your connection with nature. And there's no boogeyman, there's no Baphomet, there's no Chronos, there's nobody there to stop you, because the way has been made clear. The opening has been made manifest now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're doing. We're every week we meet, we're opening up new portals.
Yes.
But
Yes.
there ain't no spooky stuff coming out of the portals.
Mm-hmm.
There's only the connection with the observation.
Yes.
That you mentioned, the observation of it begins with observation.
Mm-hmm.
Just a non moral connection to nature. Nature is neutral. Connection to nature. Nature is neutral.
Yes.
Both of those words come from the same root. Nature, neuter. Nature, neutral. Nature
Yes.
does not have a moral complement.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Nature
of
will
course.
kill you as fast as
Mm-hmm.
you
Yes.
jump off the Empire State Building, hit the
Mm-hmm.
ground. I don't care how nice you were in your life, for how
Yes.
many good deeds you did, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
die. You're
You're
going to
gonna
be
die.
hurt.
That's right.
You're going to be
Mm-hmm.
busted up, because
Mm-hmm.
nature could care less about morality. Morality is not a construct that Allah built into nature, into
Of course
matter.
not. Mm-hmm.
Morals are a construct that Allah allowed to develop within the human.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's the human being that does things for moral reasons. Even the good things that are done by animals for other animals or for humans. The dog will protect you, etc. Those things are done because you have conditioned that animal's instincts to respond habitually to a command or to a sensitivity that that cat or that dog has for you. They'll defend you then, but it's more out of their instinctive nature that they're operating than that they're making a rational decision to do so. So the
Yes.
human being has been given this moral and rational set of legs to advance him and herself forward by. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the intellect. And what is between those two pillars, I call them Joachim and Boaz, because that's all they mean, right? What's between them are the stairway to heaven, the stairway to pineal gland enlightenment. If you thwart the effort, and I'm going to hand it back over to you now, if you thwart that effort to reach the top of those stairs that they metaphorically refer to as heaven, right, then you cause the disconnect between the human mind, the human brain, and its pineal gland possibilities for that level of enlightenment, which we call the cosmic consciousness, cosmic enlightenment. That's when the cosmos itself becomes your imam. It becomes your mother. Imam is from the same root as It becomes your mother, your source of nutrition. So you're no longer feeding off of somebody's political ideology or some partisan politics. You're not feeding off of that anymore. What you're feeding off of now is the direct connection with the universe that produced you. And the word universe is from the Sanskrit word yoni. Uni is yoni, the womb. That verse, there's a statement, there's a singular statement that comes out of that verse, the uni, the yoni. And the singular statement is understood when every baby is born, that I am born. I have no clue that I'm an African American. I have no clue that I'm a male or female. I'm only aware that I'm here. And that's where Allah wants every human life to begin. That's the Heru, the beginning light. But it's also where Allah wants every life to move up to and achieve a conscious acknowledgement of what it was once only aware of, but not in detail, not in total. So the life journey is the gathering of information in this life from the environment through the five senses. That's what this life journey is. The mind's ability to differentiate what is good for itself and what is not good for itself. That's where morals come in, but only human beings have that property. Now, if someone is in charge who's manipulating your moral thinking, like let's say a white citizens council member, a Ku Klux Klan member, they are able to manipulate the brains of their people to make them think that, white is right. If you're brown, stick around. If you're red, you can still get ahead. If you're yellow, you're still kind of mellow. But if you're black, get back. That was their moral presupposition. Those were their teaching. So people now began to fashion what they thought was moral thinking around a corrupt idea. That's the grape that we're talking about in the eye of Dajjal. Around here sitting, waiting for some physical giant, some physical monster with one eye open and one grape to come and return to the world. The Quran never says that. The Quran only speaks about the beast that will speak to man. But that beast is this 666 flesh, 6 protons, 6 electrons, 6 neutrons, 666, as the Bible puts it. The beast that will speak to you is when the biology begins to take over leadership and the mind takes the back seat. And now you're just a creature of desires, material desires. So I hope I've said enough in those few minutes to work with.
I'll try to unpack just a small portion of that, because this 666 thing, this beast, if you will, at the same time, Muslims are waiting for this beast to appear in that form, or some Muslims are waiting for that. Others are waiting for a hero, you see. And all of this stems out of the Hadith. I don't see any of this in the Quran.
Correct.
The beast we see in the Quran, that's very, very clear. The beast is also spoken of in other scriptures as well. And Leviathan, all sorts of Mamu from ancient India, these sort of names, the beast of the sea. This beast has been, he's been navigating the seas. for a long time. Yes.
He's their admiral.
Yes. We can talk about the Admiralty law another time.
Right.
In any case,
that's right. You got it. You got it. You're right on it.
Yeah. Because what's happened here? We'll go back to the Ku Klux Klan. These stupid people. Good old boys. I've met some of them. I had to deal with some of them when I was an emergency room doctor in Tennessee. You know, there's
Oh
some
yeah.
small towns there
Oh
that,
yeah.
you know, they're the sheriffs, they're local judges and people of importance there, and they have a they have a mindset that has been manipulated by certainly by greater minds than theirs. I've seen that and can bear witness to it. And what I want to bring up here is that yeah, we take this 666 and we say, oh yeah, they've been hexed. You see,
Hmm.
they have been hexed. Hex this word. They have been. There's a hex on them. They've been imprinted with this image of the man that Michelangelo drew, you
Hmm.
see, within the star, within the circle. There's a special name for it. It escapes me right now. But this idea that man is the measure of all things. Well, man is certainly not the measure of God. Is a measure of some sort of reflectance of whatever's divine, but certainly not the measure of God. So not all things. So that's a lie to begin with. Um, so they take these vain imaginations that we see mentioned in the New Testament, and they create a system out of it. They systemize these vain imaginations, just as the ancient initiation systems, which were correct to begin with, they were also systematized. So there was a decision somewhere along the line. I mean, somebody decided that they were tired of being a pirate king. You get to the age of 50, 55, you stop, you get tired wielding that sword, and somebody gives you an idea. Hey, let's get people to waste their time on our behalf. So we'll rob from them, and in order to do that, we have to hex them. You see, we have to convince them, oh, I'm God's representative
There
on
it
earth.
goes. There it
You
goes.
see, and I serve the yoni. All right, I serve the mother goddess. I'm encapsulating things that I have explained in other lectures that we'll be working on in the future. So this systemization of this vain imagination, which is a false form of theology, becomes fixed in the minds of the people who establish it. And then they establish a trust circle, you see. And usually that trust circle only includes their immediate family. But over the years, you start getting too much power, you see. Then your sons, instead of you killing your son decides to kill you. And some of these kings decide to kill their sons before their sons kill them, you see. And even Muslim emirs and sultans have done this. They're all guilty of it. Not all, but some are guilty of it. And why are they guilty of it? Well, let's just take Suleiman the Great. He did it at the suggestion of one of his favorite wives, didn't he? Oh, dare I mention that? Do the historians mention this about Suleiman the Great? No, no, they don't. You see, so he was operating in the same system. This same system of vain imagination crept into Islam, you see. Now, it uses different symbols. Not all of the symbols are different, but the idea is pretty much the same. I'm the representative of God, and you have to obey me, you see. So what happens to the Shura? The Shura kowtows. Bring this up even to so-called people who are so-called living Shura, and to so-called people who are so-called living Shura, men on the council, men on the ministries, this sort of thing. They don't want to admit their perfidy. It's too politically incorrect. So what we're talking about is the systemization of what Dr. Lobachevsky called poneros, the
Mhm.
Greek word for evil, the political organization of evil. That's what we're discussing here, dear brother, for the sake of our listeners, because myth and these ancient symbols have been used to do this. And this includes the symbols that have been used to create the Western society under, dare I say it, Judeo Christianity. Yeah. You rarely hear,
And the
yes,
fabricated
yes,
religion of
yes,
Islam that replaced al-Islam.
yes, yes, you're correct. And that's subject for another conversation
Absolutely.
because that history, yeah, I like to bring it up, but I don't want to bring it up without referring to the history because people get so upset about that. And so upset, I'm working with another brother, a fellow by the name of Leslie Terabasi he's from Canada, but he lives and teaches in Kuala Lumpur now. And he's got the history down pretty good
Yeah, he's brilliant.
on this.
I've heard
He's
him.
brilliant.
Mhm.
And there's also another fellow, Anwar Shaikh in South Africa. He's got
Another
the
brilliant
history
one.
down.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm hoping that the four of us can get together and maybe in good time, inshallah, have some sort of webinar series where we can begin to field questions from students who are genuinely interested in knowing this history because there's an opening now,
Oh,
a
yeah.
reopening of this
New
thing that's
season.
taking place now. It began 50, 60 years ago, but who cared about Islam 50, 60 years ago? Only Muslims, you see. Now you got a whole bunch of converts, and a lot of us are white guys.
Mm.
And when white guys get a hold of something, we're like crabs. We don't let go. Okay, we
Yeah, we
we
found
might.
that we
Yeah,
found that out the hard way.
yeah, yeah. I know. We're worse than honey
Chicken.
badgers. We're worse than honey badgers. And matter of fact, we just shoot them, get them out of the way, and keep on going. Take their place. You
Mm.
see. So um, I don't want to let this go, and I don't take your comment lightly there, but I think it needs to be addressed in a different venue. But you're quite correct. Al Islam was replaced by this thing we now call Islam without the Al. And this is a terrible thing, it's a travesty. It began already during the life of the Prophet. And it has an awful lot to do with what we call Yuj and Majuj, Gog and Magog. And Gog, to my knowledge, according to Dr. Honey, is the personification of the systemization of evil. Magog are the people who follow, submit to that system. So there are a lot of people saying, oh, we're going to defeat Gog and Magog, and they're actually submitted to Gog already, you see. And dear brother Sheikh Hussein is correct, about the monetary subjection of all of mankind. Now, we're all sort of subjected to that same system. It's a monetized system. It has its seat in Rome and London, and some of us know about that, others don't. And others who do know about it don't want to believe it yet. But it's all coming to pass right in front of our faces right now. So this this ancient system that once taught men and women to become alif, you see, has been perverted. And it's been perverted globally, and it used the same narrative and twisted it around,
Right.
used the same symbols and
Yes.
twisted their meanings around, even changed the names
And that's what the
and
Quran says they would do. It says with
yeah,
a twist of their tongues.
with a twist of their tongue. And so
Rainan.
they have
Yeah.
recreated a false theology,
Using
whether
the
you
same words.
using the same words.
That's where the danger is, because you think
Yes,
that's the Quran because the words are what you've always known them to be. But once
yes,
the manipulators got into the language and begin telling you that mu'min means believer, See,
Yes,
a little
yes,
while
yes,
ago,
yes.
that believer, what does that mean?
Mm,
I used to believe in Santa Claus. What is belief? That's not something that Allah put a stamp on and said, take
mm,
this and run. Because
mm,
Iman, Amana, does not mean to believe. And that's a
mm.
conversation for another day. Also, the
Yes, it
manipulation
is.
of Quranic terminology. We need to get into
Yes,
at some point.
yes, yes. Well, there's so much we need to discuss and so little time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, whatever time Allah allows us, because who knows
Yes.
how many people this will reach and how many other people will take this football and run to the goal line. We don't know.
Uh,
Allah knows.
Allah knows. Allah knows. Our job is to make sure the ball's on the field, in the
That's
right
right.
field.
That's right.
That's right. We're not referees, and we're not keeping score.
Beautiful.
Let the
Love it.
angels do
Love
that.
it when you put
Let
that.
the angels do that. So, my dear brother, having said all that, and you having said all that as well, shall I say now to you, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.